Welcome to Crosstalk Solutions. My name's Chris, and this is FreePBX 101 version 15, part 5, where we're going to be talking about the first steps you should be doing after installation. In the last video, we got through the initial setup wizard, and we ended up at the dashboard of FreePBX, so that's where we're going to start in this video. But first, if you have need for any voice over IP services or hardware, come check out crosstalksolutions.com, where we have servers and phones and SIP trunking and hosted PBX services and full turnkey PBX installations and projects, if that's the type of thing you're looking for. I certainly appreciate it. If you guys like this tutorial, come check out Crosstalk Solutions, and anything that you purchase through the store or purchase services from us directly supports the channel and the effort that we've put into creating this tutorial for you. Alright, so let's dig right into it with the initial steps after we've gotten to the FreePBX dashboard. The first thing that I like to do is just go double check my Asterisk SIP settings. Now, it should be set up for you already because we went through this during the initial setup wizard. But if you go to Settings, Asterisk SIP Settings, right here you're going to see your WAN IP address. If you don't, you can always click Detect Network Settings and that will bring in your WAN IP address. So right here is your WAN IP address, and then below that you want to add in any local area network that should be getting to FreePBX without NAT, right? So any of your internal networks should be listed under local networks. This also includes any VPN networks, and you can basically add them like this. If you have a local network of 192.168.1.x/24, you can just say 192.168.1.0/24. That's all you have to do to get those local networks in there, and then scroll to the bottom and just click Submit. Now, I don't need to make any changes to mine, so we're just going to leave this section alone, and let's go over to enable our firewall, right? Because the firewall is hands down one of the most important aspects of any PBX installation. There are a lot of people out there running scripts looking for open SIP servers that they can compromise, right? So you want to make sure that your security is extra tight for any PBX system, especially a hosted PBX system like this one. So we're going to go to Connectivity and Firewall. Before we click on that, however, you should know that FreePBX includes a contextual search up here in the upper right-hand corner. So if you click this magnifying glass, if you don't know where extensions are or voicemail settings or queues, and you just click this magnifying glass and start typing, it's going to sort of narrow everything down to exactly where you want to be. So if I start typing firewall, boom, right there. I just typed fire W, and all of a sudden I've got firewall right here, and you can click on that and it will take you directly to where you need to go. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is come over here to Networks. And the only network that I am trusting right now is the /32 WAN IP address of my home office here. And the reason that that's the only network that's in there is because that's the only network that I want to allow access to FreePBX from. Okay, if I had other WAN IP addresses in a hosted server, for instance, if I had employees working at home, I would want to put their IP addresses in here. If I had satellite offices, I would want to put those WAN IP addresses in here. If I had a local server and not a hosted server, I would want to put the local area networks that need to connect. So whatever phones are in whatever local area networks that need to connect in, we are basically adding them here to the trusted or the local zone. Either one of those will work. Now, trusted, the different zones here are interesting. Trusted zone means you're wide open, right? There's nothing, no ports are blocked off at all for the trusted zone. The local zone is basically saying that only the ports needed for FreePBX are open, but say something like, NTP for network time. That would not be open to someone in the local zone, though it would be open to someone in the trusted zone, because trusted zone basically means there's no firewall for any of these IP addresses. So if you aren't sure which one to use, just use local zone, and that's going to be fine for most local area networks or WAN IP addresses that need to connect into the server, because it's only going to give them access to the services that you are allowing through FreePBX, which we will look at in just a second. FreePBX, however, does like to have at least one trusted network in here. So I'm going to leave my WAN IP address as trusted. But again, if I was on a LAN and I wanted to add my local area network, I would put 192.168.1.0, again, substitute your own local subnet here. And then I would set that to locally trusted traffic, and then you can give it a description like, my LAN, or whatever you want to call it. The descriptions are very helpful for the FreePBX firewall, especially if you have a lot of people working from home or something. You can say, Bob's home IP address. That way you know exactly what each of these rules is for. So I highly recommend that you utilize the description field for all of your firewall, sort of all of the authorized IPs that you add in here. And I should say also, if you're adding a LAN, it should be in the CIDR format, which I did not do initially. So it should be 192.168.1.0, or again, substitute your subnet /24 or /16 or /8 or /29, like whatever it actually happens to be. Once you have trusted all of your local networks or all of the WAN IP addresses that are connecting out to your hosted server, then you want to come over here to the Interfaces tab. And when we click on Interfaces, notice that we have ETH0. This is our main interface of the FreePBX. Again, I'm a hosted server, so ETH0 is the only interface, but if you have a bare metal server, you might have multiple Ethernet ports listed here. And whichever one is your main Ethernet port, typically it's going to be ETH0. That's the one that you want to modify. So notice that it says trusted excluded from firewall. That means that right now, my actual WAN interface, my hosted interface on this FreePBX is wide open and exposed to the entire world. We do not want that, right? So what we want to do here is change this to the internet zone, and that is going to lock that firewall in place and basically say any traffic that's trying to pass ETH0 is now firewalled. We're considering that internet traffic on the outside of ETH0. Okay, so even if you're on your LAN, this is a good thing to set up, right? You don't ever want to leave your Ethernet port just trusted, because that means that any of the rules that you did over here in the Networks tab aren't going to matter because your Ethernet interface is wide open anyway. So stick your Ethernet into the internet zone, and then that means that the firewall's in place, and then manage your exceptions, so which LANs and which WAN IP addresses can connect to the server in the Networks tab. All right, so I've set this into the internet zone. We're going to update that interface, and this is going to turn on the firewall. Here is a pro tip for the FreePBX firewall. Sometimes when you set your Ethernet 0 into the internet zone, maybe you screwed up something on the Networks tab and you've now locked yourself out of the server. This has happened to me. It can certainly happen to you as well. If that happens, there is a safety net in place for FreePBX. What you have to do is reboot the server twice within 5 minutes. And then the FreePBX firewall is disabled for 5 minutes before it re-enables again on the second time the server boots up. So if you've got a hosted server, like I could go into the back end of Vultr and force this server to restart and then force it to restart again within 5 minutes, and that will basically go to this safety net where the FreePBX firewall is disabled for 5 minutes. If you have a bare metal server, you can just unplug the power, plug it back in, wait a minute, unplug the power again, plug it back in, and now the second time that it comes back up, the firewall is disabled for 5 minutes, allowing you to go in and fix any mistakes that you made in your authorized networks in order to regain access to the system. So now you should have your FreePBX Ethernet interface in the internet zone. Again, do not skip this step. Put this into the internet zone unless you absolutely know what you're doing. And then we are going to click on the responsive firewall. So the responsive firewall is something that I typically don't use for my clients unless it's like a last resort. And the reason I say that is, imagine you have a scenario where you've got a whole bunch of people who work from home. And typically people, when they're coming in from their home networks or they're from their home WAN IP addresses, they usually don't have static IP addresses. They usually have dynamic IP addresses. So how can you authorize a dynamic IP address? There's actually two ways. Number one way is if you click on the Networks tab, you can enter a dynamic DNS name like bobhome.dynedns.org or whatever his dynamic DNS name happens to be. So this works, but it's not bulletproof because there's time to live in DNS, right? So if his WAN IP address changes, it might be an hour or more before the FreePBX knows that there's been a change there. What you can also do is enable the responsive firewall. The responsive firewall basically says when you turn it on for, say, PJ-SIP, which is the SIP protocol that we're going to be using throughout this series, when I've enabled the responsive firewall for PJ-SIP, that means that anyone in the world who's not on my blacklist can attempt to register to the server. Now, what FreePBX does is it lets through a very small amount of packets from any WAN IP address. And the amount of packets that it lets through are enough for any valid device to successfully authenticate. And once those valid devices successfully authenticates, they're essentially authorized in FreePBX automatically through the responsive firewall. However, if you have like a brute force attempt where someone's trying a whole bunch of different passwords trying to authorize, by like the third or fourth one they try, FreePBX is going to be like, whoa, 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 I don't think so, buddy. You're in timeout. And it puts them into a jail of sorts for a certain amount of time. When they come out of jail, if they start hitting the server again, it puts them in jail for even longer and longer and longer, and it's just almost impossible for them to actually do any sort of brute force password attempt against your server. If you have to enable responsive firewall, it's actually pretty good, right? So it actually works pretty well. But if you don't have to enable it, that's even better, right? That's more secure because then there's like literally no chance that anyone can even attempt to get into your server or compromise it in any way. All right, let's take a quick look around the firewall. If you pull out the tab or the drawer on the right-hand side, we've got main. That's where we are right here. If you click on status, that's going to show you how many people have been blocked, how many people have been authorized through the responsive firewall, etc. If you click on services, this allows you to set up your different services for different internet zones. So for instance, if I wanted to open up SSH to the internet zone, I can do that. Don't do that, by the way. You don't want SSH open to the internet zone. But this is where you would come through and authorize different services to be opened up through different zones. Then you've got some extra services. If you want to add custom services, you can add those in here. And then we have our blacklist, which is basically anyone that we are specifically blocking out, we're going to put on this blacklist. All right, now that we have our FreePBX firewall configured, let's go over to System Admin. So if we choose Admin and then pull it all the way down to System Admin, this is the System Admin section of FreePBX. Now, one of the things that I'm going to do first here is I'm going to purchase the Sys Admin Pro module. Now you notice over here on the side, there's only, so many different options that we can do here. Sys Admin Pro gives you more options for this section. And there are options that you really want to take advantage of, such as the ability to have FreePBX be its own VPN server, the ability to control email settings and SMTP settings through the GUI as opposed to going and manually having to configure postfix files and stuff. Among other things, it adds a lot of functionality. It's only $25 one time for basically the life of the PBX. I think it's a 25-year license, but let's be honest, that's basically the life of the PBX. So we're going to go purchase the Sys Admin Pro module first. To do that, we're going to go to Admin, Module Admin. We're going to click Check Online, and this is going to show us all of the updates that are available for the server. Keep in mind, we're not going to update the server yet. We're going to do that very soon here, but we want to scroll down until we find this one here, System Admin, and we're going to click Buy. Now that adds it to our cart, so we're going to go ahead and log in with our Sangoma portal username and password. And then I already have a credit card on file, so we're just going to say complete checkout. So that's it. We have purchased our first commercial module. And now it says waiting for Apache to restart, but actually we don't need to wait for it. We can just close this out. And now let's go back to Admin, System Admin. And you'll notice now that there are a lot more settings in this section, including dynamic DNS. Here's the email setup, and on and on and on. It's almost, so when we install FreePBX for customers, this is mandatory, right? We never ever install a FreePBX system for our customers without Sys Admin Pro installed, and I would suggest that you do the same. Okay, so let's go up here to activation first. Activation is where we can see our deployment ID, and then we can see what registered modules we have. In this case, we've only purchased Sys Admin, and we can see the expiration date of 2046, right? That's a ways in the future. Pretty good deal for 25 bucks. So, okay, so there's our activation. Again, this is your deployment ID. Know it and love it. Like I said, this is what your commercial licenses are tied to. Then let's click on DNS. And in DNS, we want to just give our server some DNS, right? So it says normally your first DNS server should be 127.0.0.1. Add any additional servers after that. So it kind of did that. It gave us this 108.61.10.10. I'm not exactly sure what that is, but that's something that Vultr does. I'm just going to add 1.1.1.1. And we'll give it 9.9.9.9 as well. We're just kind of giving it some extra DNS servers for name resolution, and click Submit. If you have your own internal LAN DNS, such as Microsoft Active Directory or something that's running on your own firewall or a Pi-hole or something like that, that's what you're going to want to use if you're connecting on your LAN. Since this is a hosted PBX, I'm using just publicly available DNS servers. All right, next let's click on intrusion detection. Now, intrusion detection is a little bit different from the FreePBX firewall, but they work in conjunction with each other. And you can see down here that it's already been working. I already have an IP address that's been banned. This is someone who tried to hit my server and they tried to brute force something or who knows what. This stuff happens constantly, right? It's happening all the time. There's scripts running against your WAN IP address all the time on the internet. So right now we have one person banned. But let's say we want to make sure that we're not banning any of our authorized IP addresses. So you're going to want to put your LAN IP addresses in here. You're going to want to put your VPN subnets in here. Any WAN IP addresses if it's a hosted PBX. So I'm going to put in my own WAN IP address and then click Submit. All right, next I have clicked on Network Settings. This is where you can set a static IP address for your PBX if you like. You can select the interface you'd like to change, and then just select static right here and enter in your IP, netmask, and gateway, and then go ahead and say Save Interface. Keep in mind, if you change the IP address to a static IP address, you are now going to have to reconnect to FreePBX on the new IP address once you've hit that Save Interface button. Next, let's click on hostname. So in hostname, by default, the hostname is freepbx.sangoma.local. That's a boring hostname. We don't want to use that. So let's use our actual hostname of testpbx.crosstalksip.com. Again, substitute your own server's FQDN for new hostname. That's whether you have an on-premise or a hosted PBX, you should have a valid FQDN for the server. We're going to click Update Hostname. Next, let's click on Notification Settings. This is where we're sending notifications for things like UPS alerts, safe asterisk, storage notifications, intrusion detection notifications, and if you hover over the question mark anywhere you see it in this FreePBX interface, it'll show you a little bit of extra information about that particular item. So we're going to say from address pbx@crosstalksolutions.com, and then we want all of our alerts to go to info@crosstalksolutions.com. We just copy, paste, 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 and then click Submit. Next, we're going to skip down here and click on PNP configuration. PNP is a zero-touch service. It's something that you can use if you have Sangoma phones and everything's local on your LAN. It's sort of a way to auto-detect for the phones when they boot up, to auto-detect where your FreePBX is. I typically don't use PNP, and it doesn't work in a hosted server anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and disable this. If you're going to use PNP, you can leave this enabled. If you're not going to use PNP, like if you're going to use option 66 TFTP for the phones, or you're going to do zero-touch provisioning, then you can disable PNP safely. It doesn't really do much either way, but I don't need extra services running on the server, so we're just going to disable that and click Submit. Next, let's click on Timezone. And we want to set a valid time zone for our server because this is going to have to do with, for instance, time conditions. You know, when we set when the server opens and closes, right? So we're going to want to set, in my case, America and Los Angeles, and then we're going to click Submit. Now, notice what it says here. Warning. To complete the time zone changes, you must reboot your system. This is true. You have to reboot the system. Actually, it's not entirely true. If you know all of the correct services that need to be restarted, you can manually do this without rebooting the system, but it's just so much easier to just reboot and be done with it. So let's go ahead and reboot. We're going to come over here to Power Options. And then we have the option to power off the server or reboot. In our case, we're going to say reboot. This action will cause the system to stop processing calls. Do you wish to continue? Yes. Okay, then you need to type reboot and click OK. And if you do power off, you have to type power off and then click OK. So we're going to click OK and OK. And now our server is rebooting, and that is going to do it for this video. In our next video, we are finally going to get to updating FreePBX. So I look forward to showing you how to properly update the system. And yeah, we will see you guys in the next video.